prints. Okay, I guess this means I'm talking out of the right side of my mouth. Okay. Anyway, so the plan for tonight is to talk about ways, especially if you're starting out or if you just need some tips on how to better organize yourself, keeping your records for your business. The not so fine print is that we're not CPAs. Whoops, back one. We are not CPAs, professional accountants, or bookkeepers, tax advisors, or experts. Jack of all trades, but master of none. We're going to discuss a lot of tools, techniques, and tips that are helpful to us in running small art and craft businesses. And for those of you who don't like computers very much, you do not have to be computer literate to do any of this. It is helpful, but everything here can be done manually. And at one point I did bookkeeping for a company out in Los Angeles before the advent of spreadsheets and so forth, and it is actually possible. Okay, now bookkeeping for artisans. Bookkeeping, we're going to define that as the activity or occupation of keeping records of the financial affairs of a business. Now the structure of the discussion, and this is kind of important. First we're going to discuss, do you have a business or a hobby? And if you have a business, why you need to keep records. If you have a hobby, not so important. We're going to talk about the official business documents that you need. And this is relevant to this area, but from county to county it's going to change, and from state to state it may change a little as well. We're going to talk about manual versus electronic bookkeeping. And then we're going to give you a healthy list of the records you need to keep and create for your business, and where you get the data, how you can organize the data, and how you can use the data to improve your business and, more importantly, do your taxes. And then we're going to talk about credit card systems. And in this particular case, there's a whole bunch of different ways you can take credit cards, but in this particular case, we're going to do a spotlight on Square. Carol has used Square a whole lot, so she really is an expert, even if I said she wasn't. Anyway, okay, so do you have a business or a hobby? A business is formed for the purpose of making a profit. A hobby is something you do for fun and recreation. And we have nothing against hobbies, but if you're doing a hobby, you're not focused on making money, and therefore you have completely different or almost non-existent requirements, other than as long as you can afford to do it, you can have fun doing it. Somebody once said, without customers, you don't have a business, you have a hobby. So if you're looking to sell things, you should at least consider whether or not you want to make it a business and make a profit out of it. For this presentation, we're going to assume that you want to form a business, and if you want to have a business, you're going to have to do some bookkeeping. Okay, so why keep books? Well, there's a couple of important reasons. Number one, how to understand how to make your business profitable. You also need to keep books so that you can do your federal, state, and any other local or other taxes that you might have to, licenses and so forth that you have to do. And you also want to do it for marketing purposes. The information that you keep about your business can help inform your decisions about what you do in the future for your business. And this is important. It took me a long time to wrap my head around this, but the records that you keep to help you do your taxes are not necessarily the same as the ones that you keep to figure out whether your business is being profitable or not. So in some ways, you'll get we'll give you lists of things to do, and it may not be immediately obvious why you have to do both of them, but one way of keeping records will help you do your taxes much more easily, and the other way will give you a much better look at what you're selling and what you're not selling and so forth. Okay, first, the official business documents. This is if you're going to go about this legally. I'm not in the business of commenting on whether you want to do it or you can't. I'm not going to say you must do this or you will die. Lightning is not going to strike you. Some people have run businesses for years and not done any of this. But this is sort of the path where, the path of greatest legality. First, you need a federal IRS employer ID number. It's very easy to apply for and very easy to get. They give them to anybody. Oh, okay. Remind you tomorrow what?
On the screen.
Oh.
You're not sure why.
What am I supposed to remind you of? Okay, fine. That's the federal. With the state, you're going to need a permanent or temporary tax ID number for the states in which you directly sell items. I live in Virginia. I do most of my sales in Virginia. I have a Virginia sales tax ID number. But I also have one in Maryland because I've done a fair amount of business in Maryland. If you do shows in any of these localities, including DC, you may be asked to get a temporary one, which is doable. In DC, temporary turns out to be permanent, whether you want it to be permanent or not, and then they come after you into perpetuity. Don't even ask me about DC. I will turn funny colors. Then you may also need a county or city business license. In Fairfax, we have, you have to have a business license if your revenues are greater than $10,000 a year. Theoretically, you should still file the return, but if you haven't made $10,000 a year, then the business license costs you nothing. If you make more than $10,000 a year, up to $50,000 a year, it'll cost you $30. If you make more than $50,000 a year, you should be up here and I should be sitting back there. Okay. Any questions about that? Cool. Manual versus electronic. Everything can be done manually. It's perfectly acceptable. Business records have been kept manually for thousands of years. All it takes is a piece of accounting paper and perhaps a notebook that you can put it into, but you can document everything by hand and have perfectly acceptable records for the IRS. That said, keeping records electronically is generally better. Calculations are much faster and probably more accurate. Why do we have music? I mean, it's nice music. Would you like me to sing? No, I think not. It's easier to extract information. Oops. Hello? It's easier to extract information from electronically kept records. For example, you could say, show me all the sales I've made of such and such a product that I have, or show me all the sales of all of my products so I can compare what's selling better or worse. Taking a little time to learn some of the electronic things will save you a lot of time later on. And it tends to save trees unless you print out things multiple times, in which case you're probably burning up a few more. In either case, garbage in, garbage out. If you don't take the time to put input data accurately, it could be in trouble. Am I going to have to yell now? No, you're still there? Oh, all right. Okay. Electronic bookkeeping methods include spreadsheet programs, such as MS Excel. There used to be a Lotus 123. I'm not sure it even still exists. There's a number of them out there. The spreadsheet programs are fully customizable and perform your calculations automatically. So that allows you to look at information a number of different ways without having to recalculate everything using your calculator or your pen and pencil. It's fairly easy setup. You can add data, you can make changes, you can obtain totals, and you don't have to do any of that manually. For those of you who are not so computer literate, this is kind of a screenshot of a spreadsheet And basically it gives you a lot of columns and a lot of rows, and you can fill in data in all of those boxes. It enables you to, for example, create a record, and that's going horizontally of here's, for example, here's this product, here's what it looks like, here's the date I made it, here's how many of them I have, and so forth. You can put in a whole lot of information about a particular item. There are other electronic bookkeeping methods as well. There's all kinds of bookkeeping software, such as Quicken. They provide all the forms. They do everything that you could do on a spreadsheet, but they provide forms for your data entry. They generate reports automatically. They link to your bank accounts if you want to know how much money you have in the bank at any given moment. There's a whole lot of things that they do automatically. I started setting up my bookkeeping system in Quicken, and to me it was terribly confusing because they were asking me to do things in a way that did not, to me, seem logical, knowing what I was actually looking for at the end. Some of you guys may find that that's the only way to go. So clearly these people sell a lot of these software products, and so there is something good about them. They are typically set up for larger businesses than most of us have. They're a little bit more complex and challenging to learn, and the initial setup will take some more time. Once you've done it, though, it should be very easy. And these are just some of the popular bookkeeping programs that are around. There's another way to go, and that is you can use a basic database program such as MS Access. It's a little bit more labor intensive, and if you haven't worked on database programs before, you may find it a little daunting. But it enables you to create forms for your own data entry. It lets you create your own custom reports, whatever kind of information you want to get out of it. It allows you to extract information from different databases and compile it all together. So basically, it allows for a richer, more flexible data collection and whatever reports you want. So I can run reports and say, okay, well, how much did I collect in sales tax in Virginia versus how much did I collect in sales tax in Maryland? So you can be very specific in asking it for the information you're looking for. As I said, though, there is a fairly steep learning curve if you haven't worked with databases before. And this is a screenshot of one of the forms that I have. This is how I put in information about each work that I complete. And it talks about, I'm sure you all can't read that, but it's when it was completed, the weight, the length and the width of it, the weight I used to calculate how much the cost in glass is. And then I can add the cost of things that I use to make the piece. I can add the cost of framing. And so all of the things that are specific to my work are things that I've put into this form. Okay, so it's kind of clear that's kind of a summary of the different kinds of ways. You can do it manually, electronically, super electronically, and ultra electronically. So what records do you need to keep for a business? Well, you can basically lump these into two groups. You need to keep the records related to your revenues, which is everything that your business earns from sales of your art and or raw materials. You could, for example, sell raw materials and include that in your revenues, or services that you provide. If you repair something for someone which isn't really making a product, and they pay you to do that, then those are all revenues. It's anything you earn from your art and craft. The other big category is expenses, and this is everything your business spends to make, market, and sell your product or service. And we're going to go into these in a lot more detail, but keeping track of these two types of records these are the key numbers that are going to tell you whether your business is profitable or whether you're losing your shirt. Okay, for revenues, to go into a little bit more detail, It's the total amount that you get from sales of products and services, including any and all earnings from your craft business. So that includes sales paid by cash, paid by credit card, paid by checks, money orders, and probably even bitcoins. You should consider, when you're creating your revenue, consider using category subtotals like sales by product type. Some people do different kinds of things, like maybe you do, we'll say dolls and we'll say toaster covers over here. You may want to add up all your revenues from one product category, the dolls, as well as adding up all of the ones from your toaster covers, so you can figure out where you're making the most revenues. You need to keep records of your sales. One way to do this, and certainly it's the simplest and least complicated, is to use a sales book. One that makes duplicate copies. The one I have, I think, makes 3 copies. So you write down what the sale is, how much it was, and all that information. You've gotten these kinds of receipts. It shows a million times. So you give one copy to whoever purchased it, so they have a record of what they purchased, and so forth. They're especially useful at shows, and you can, for example, buy custom sales books that have your logo and all of your information. They're not that much more expensive, than an essentially blank one, and it gives everybody all of your contact information when you give it to them. Having said that, there are some programs, and Carol will get to this later with Square, that you don't actually need to keep this sales book. But if you're just starting out, it's a great way to keep track of everything. I have all my sales books going back to the very beginning, so if I ever have to go back and look and see what I sold something for, how much I sold it for, if I gave somebody a discount, the record is all there. From this, you should probably make an ongoing list of your sales. I do it again in a spreadsheet, but it makes it much easier. Rather than, I don't actually have to go back to all the sales books and leaf through it, but I can go through a list and usually find the information I need. If you do it in a spreadsheet, then you can sort it. Say, okay, give me all of the things that I've sold to customer X, and then it'll sort it and bring you up all the sales you've made to that particular person. So there's a lot of good reasons to keep records of the sales, not the least of which is adding up how much you sell. The next slide this is a sample order list that I do. The grayed out areas were the names of people who bought it, which I didn't think was particularly relevant for this. But it shows, there's a list that shows what was sold, the subtotal of what it was, if there was more than one item, if different items were sold, how much I collected in sales tax, and then it gives me different summaries. And this is one of the forms that I use when I'm doing my state tax returns, because I can go back and look at all the sales that I made in a particular state and know how much I have to pay in sales tax. Yes, ma'am.
So you have a spreadsheet for the items where you have the revenue and the expenses. At the end of the year, when you did a sales product that you made a particular year, do you, how do you carry over for the next year? For tax purposes, do you just claim the expenses, meaning material?
There are different ways to do that. And next month, as a continuation of this helping you run your business thing, we're going to have 2 tax accountants come in and talk about taxes for artists and what you can claim and how you can do the accounting systems to carry forward. There are different ways of doing it. The most important thing is you do it consistently every year. And I would much rather let them explain that. I do it on an expense, and we'll get to this when we do expenses. But if I got the check that year, it's revenue that year. If I made the expense that year, it's an expense for that year. If I get it on January 2nd, it's next year. Anyway, more information about your sales is better. The critical information that you really have to have is the date of the sale, how much the sale was, and you should separate out the total amount of the sale, of what you charged for that product, and break out the sales tax extra. For sales tax, for the states, you're just kind of collecting it for them and sending it off to them. It doesn't count as revenue. You're being the state agent and collecting it and mailing it off to Richmond or whatever state you're in. Some very important information, it's not critical and people have done without it. You want the description or product code or whatever you have, the item number of the item that you sold, any discounts that you offered and gave, customer contact information. It's much easier to get business from return customers than it is to find new customers. So you should always keep that customer contact information so you can alert them when you have new things to do. That's kind of a standard marketing thing.
Emily, can
Yes,
I ask
ma'am.
you about that? Because that's the one thing that I feel so awkward about. I know a lot of people have customers fill in like their email address and all that, but when are you having them do it as you're adding up the sale, or when is the appropriate time to ask them that?
I do it when I'm writing up the sale. And the reason I do it is not, I don't say, hey, I want this for marketing purposes so I can, wallpaper your house with postcards. I say, in case the credit card thing doesn't go through or whatever, can I have your phone number, your email address,
Okay, that's a great way. Thank you.
whatever. So it's, yes ma'am.
Or you also can say, if you want to be on my mailing list.
Right. A lot of people don't, but mostly I'm interested because if my credit card thing doesn't work properly,
Yeah.
I don't have Square, which is much more reliable. My credit card system that I had been using was a store and forward, so the credit card sale didn't go through until I got home at night. So there was always the potential. Nothing bad ever happened, but there was always that potential. So I collect those as a matter of point and say, just in case something happens, let me know how to reach you. And you don't have to collect everything. If you know you're not going to be mailing out postcards, don't bother with their address. But email and phone number is more helpful. Okay, so that's everything kind of about revenues. You got to keep track of everything you make and how you make it and how much you made and where you got it from. And keep all of that. That's kind of in a whole separate place from your expenses. So now let's talk about expenses. The expenses is the money total of every product or service you use to conduct your craft business. It includes anything you buy, rent, have a contract for, pay someone to do for you. All of those things are part of the cost of running your business and making your products. Ultimately you want to categorize these expenses so that it will help you with taxes and to provide you an intelligent view of how you're spending your money. At the end of the year, and I've noticed this happens a lot, my expenses may very well outweigh the revenues. Well, where am I spending all this money? Is it in mileage going back and forth to meetings? Is it in classes? Is it in I'm spending too much for glass, or I've spent so much in glass and I'm not making nearly as many products as I ought to be making? You need to have an idea of how much each element that goes into your business costs. So how to begin keeping expense records? Well, this is my system, and it's clunky, but it works. I use 2 boxes and a calendar. You buy 2 boxes, and I'd make it at least wide enough for an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper to go into. And you start putting every document that shows proof of anything that you ever paid related to your business in them. And the second thing I do, and I'll explain the 2 boxes in a second, I also get a calendar. So that allows you to record every time you go on a business-related errand, whether it might be going to the bank to make a deposit, it might be going to to the store where you buy your supplies, anything and everything that you do for your business, you want to record that on a calendar. I'll come back to why you do that in a minute. It actually gets much easier, much faster. Okay, so now the boxes. In box number 1, every receipt that might have anything whatsoever to do with your business. I've really gotten so that, you know, unless it's for junk food on a Sunday, I throw the receipts in this box. But mostly all of these receipts include the date you purchased something, what the item or service you purchased was, who you bought it from, and how much you paid. And that includes any shipping and taxes that you've paid. So you want to include not only just the paper receipts that you get, but print out receipts of things that you buy online from Amazon, for example. Print out those receipts. Receipts for business-related equipment or space that you've rented. Receipts for professional association memberships like NVHG. Business-related periodicals and books. Receipts for any structural improvements and repairs to your home workshop. All of those things you want to throw in this box. When in doubt, throw it in anyway. You can sort it out at the end of the year. Okay, box number 2, and to be truthful, I only have 1 box, but if you had 2 boxes, you would put in every statement or invoice that might be evidence of a business-related purchase. And into this you would do bank statements and credit card statements and rental agreements and service contracts and insurance statements, both for business and personal. Your mortgage and other loan statements. Part of this will come back as to whether or not you want to deduct for having a home office. But if you're thinking about that, then you're going to need your mortgage and loan statements, you're going to need your utility and phone bills, you're going to need property tax bills, you're going to need payroll statements if you have staff, you're going to need any licenses that you've paid for. Throw all of that in the other box. Now while you're at it, throw in those receipts for donations that you make to nonprofit organizations. If you've donated something to your church for their silent auction, if you've donated craft items or service things to Meals on Wheels or Second Story, try to get a receipt from whoever you did the service for and put it in the box. Whenever you donate anything, service, time, expertise, whatever, to a 501c3 organization, ask for a receipt and put it in the box. Okay, now we're going to go back to, are y'all squared on what all goes in the boxes? Yes?
I have 2 questions, or one statement and a question. I know from my accountant that if you give a donation to a 501c3 as the artist, you can only donate your materials.
That is true.
If I bought a Picasso and I own it and I donate it, I can write off that huge number, but I can't write anything more than the materials.
That is true.
That's a real bummer. But,
We're going to touch on that in a minute because, yes, when you donate it, you only get so much for a tax deduction. On the other hand, I just learned this from my insurance agent. If my house burns down and all of my inventory burns down with it, when I declare the value of the inventory of finished artwork, I can include my time and some of the other stuff. So again, it comes, to 2 different veins in terms of what you can donate and, what something is really worth.
That goes under the home insurance.
Well, I have a business insurance apart from my home insurance.
So which one is it called?
I would check with my insurance agent because it depends on the policy that you have. All my glass inventory is covered in my business insurance policy.
The second part, and maybe you will be covering this later, the new ruling on sales tax, and I know Maria and I were talking about it. I have a business license and a tax thing in Virginia, so if you buy from me in Virginia, it's copacetic. But if I send you something and you're in Maryland, do I charge, what do I do? Is it, in the new rule, is it exempt, or do I charge you Virginia and just call it, that's where I live?
Well,
What happens?
Maryland is the one who would be complaining. Because you've sold something to someone in Maryland and they haven't paid sales tax. There is that part in each of your state income tax returns where you're supposed to declare everything that you bought and how much you paid for sales tax and anything that you bought that you didn't pay sales tax on. Then you're supposed to give that to the state. What I have been doing is, not so much Maryland because I have a sales tax number there, but if I sell something to somebody out in California, I don't charge them sales tax. I let them deal with the state of California, and it's on them. Whether the new rules and our tax guys may be able to help with this, how they apply to small businesses is probably going to be very different from how they apply to, say, Amazon or somebody who, who has a huge national audience. Yes, ma'am.
I might be able to help. I'm certainly not an accountant, so I'm really looking forward to next month. But my understanding is that with the new laws, that first of all, it's up to each state to implement their own tax restrictions. So not every state has done that. My understanding is that what some states are starting to do is they're saying once you get to 200 sales in that state or a minimum dollar amount, then you have to start start tracking that and start charging sales tax. Now, whether that's per year or ever, I'm not clear on. So I'm looking forward to next month, but I think at this point, not every state has implemented something, and the states that are implementing it are setting these thresholds where, at least for me as a small business owner, I'm probably not going to hit that threshold for that particular state.
So if you mailed something to somebody in Michigan, you would put it on your Virginia sales as exempt?
No. What you can do is on this Virginia sales tax returns, they ask you if there are things that are exempt from Virginia sales tax.
Right.
And anything that you ship out of state is exempt from Virginia sales tax. So it's therefore if you're sending it to Maryland, then you would have to record it on your Maryland sales tax. But since you don't normally send things to Michigan and you don't have a sales tax number with Michigan, then you let that person deal with Michigan when they do their taxes. Does that help?
I was going to the account.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, any other questions regarding keeping expenses and revenues?
How often do you pay the sales tax? Every quarter?
Well, when you start, you often have to pay every month. But once they figure out how much you're making and how much you're not sending and so forth, then you may not have to do it. Then they'll say, okay, you can go do it quarterly, or you can do it every 6 months, or whatever. The state determines that based on how much revenues and therefore tax you're collecting. Yes, ma'am.
Emily, when I signed up for my tax, my tax number, I told them I was seasonal, October, November, December, and then they don't bother me the rest of the year.
Okay.
Otherwise, you have to send in zeros.
Are you in Virginia?
Right.
Are you in Virginia?
Yeah.
No, Maryland.
I guess in Maryland, I pay twice a year.
Well, in Maryland, I have to call up Helen every year.
Right. I mean, different states have different laws about it. If you do it seasonal, then they may just charge it seasonally. My sales, I could make sales and do commissions and stuff any time of the year, so I didn't go that route. But that could be perfectly, valid for those of you who only sell, during certain months of the year.
No. When I called Virginia about getting a temporary tax ID, they said I had to do at least 3 shows in Virginia, and I only do 1 or 2.
Then you're off the hook there.
But you still have to fill out a form for Virginia that reflect your sales, and you have to still send in the taxes for those 1 or 2 shows a year. There is an SF. SD, whatever it is. There's a form. We have them when we do our shows. We give them to vendors if they need them.
And for Virginia, you have to file 30 days after your show.
Same for Maryland.
Yeah.
Okay, so each state has their own rules. Whatever state you live in and state, if you also do a lot of business, it behooves you to learn the details. And mostly the websites for those states are really pretty good about explaining what you have to do and how you have to do it, when you have to do it, and so forth. Which reminds me, I have to do my sales tax this month. Okay. Okay. So we finished with the 2 boxes, got those squared away. So now we're going on to the business calendar. Okay. The business calendar I just say where I've been every day for business. You know, if I've been to the bank, if I've been to the supply store, if I've been to the glass store, if I've been over to Carol's to use her kiln, if I've come to a glass guild or a Handcrafters Guild meeting. I just write all those things down. What you'll notice is that there are a lot of things that you do multiple times each year. For example, you know you're going to come to an NVHG meeting 12 times a year. If you buy your supplies, if I buy them over at Weiser Glass in Baltimore, and that's where I usually buy it, I'm going to see that on my calendar a lot. When you start getting the patterns of the places that you go a lot, then you figure out how many miles it is to that place. You can do this on MapQuest. So like I know that a round trip to Weiser Glass is going to be 41 miles. I know that a round trip to my bank is fine. So you start collecting, so I can look at, once I have the calendar, I can go through and create a list of all the places that I went that year, what date I went there, why I went there for purchasing things or for a meeting or whatever. And then I can say, okay, this is the miles that I go, and I just have this list. Weiser is this far, Carol's house is this far, NVHG meetings are this far, and so forth. So you just make a really fast list that says, here's how many miles I went. When ultimately you turn that in for taxes, all you're going to do is add up all the miles, multiply it times 51 or 52 cents or whatever the government magic number is that year, and you know how much mileage you did. You can also keep track of your mileage, in the car. A lot of people keep little books and things, and, just say, okay, I drove this many miles for business on such and such a date. I found that's really tedious, and if I just know from the calendar where I've been, then it's much easier to figure it out without kind of, collecting it in a book on a day-by-day basis.
Emily?
Yes, ma'am.
Another alternative to the book is the electronic version, which is it's part of my expense spreadsheet. I have a column for supplies, I have a column for show fees, I have a column for mileage. And so whenever there's a mileage fee, I go home tonight, tomorrow I'll put in there, I was at the meeting, I know how many miles it is, and at the bottom it calculates
Right.
all of that. So
That's
the third alternative.
That's coming up next. The next slide, categorizing expenses. You have to do it. The tax authorities handle different kinds of expense categories differently. Yes, ma'am.
So I actually use an app for mileage. It's called MileIQ. And it automatically tracks where I've been. So at the end of the day, I just look at it and I swipe left or right depending on whether it was for personal use or for business use. And then things that you do, the trips that you take very often, you can just auto categorize them. Makes life so much simpler than writing it down.
Yet another way. I'm sure there's apps to do so many things now. I find that I kind of mix trips, like I'll go, and I have to stop at the bank, and then I have to go over to the grocery store and pick up toilet paper, and then I have to go over to Carol's house, and I have to go. So I kind of mix and match things. So for me, that's a little bit more challenging. But I also don't have a smartphone. So if I had a smartphone, then it might be much easier for me to do it that way. So there's how much technology you want to put into it can dictate what way you choose to keep track of all these things. Anyway, Going back to how you have to categorize expenses, some categories require special calculations. For example, mileage. If you're doing home office, if you have a home office and you want to deduct part of whatever your mortgage payment is or how much you're paying, there's a calculation there that you have to do based on how much of your house your business is taking up. For some expenses, only a certain percentage of the expense is actually deductible. So ultimately, it will make your life much easier to categorize all these expenses. If you have this whole list of expenses, you categorize and say, this expense was mileage, this expense was this expense was that, and so forth. It really does work, and the reason I can say that is last year, I kept all these records, did the box and the calendar and so forth. And I started my taxes, I think it was early in February. And 3 days later, I had all of these calculations. I input everything into spreadsheets and so forth, and I was finished with my taxes 3 days later. So, I mean, you really can make short work of it if you do a little bit of, organizing up front, and you know the things that you have to do. Part of it is entering things into spreadsheets. If you have an app that'll do it, great. I think Carol uses Square for a lot of the stuff that I still use spreadsheets for. So anyway, here are the receipts, the categories of business expenses that you have to consider. And these are definitions that, for the most part, I'm pulling out of TurboTax because that's how I do my taxes. The cost of goods sold. Any product, service, or labor expense that is a direct component of the product you sell. So for mine, it's how much the glass costs, if I put a frame around it, if I have to, put picture hangers on the back of it. It does not include things like my grinder heads. It does not include things like paper towels. It does not include things, all of the other stuff that you use when you're making your product. It's only the things that are part of your product when it's finished. The second one is office and workshop supplies. And these are the consumable supplies that you use to conduct your business. This is all the paper towels. This is all the, if you have to have what?
Glue.
All the glue, paper, stuff that you have, foam if you have to protect something while you're doing something else, masking tape. Painter's tape. It's all those supplies that you have to kind of keep up with to make your products. Then you have equipment and tools. And that's any electronic tools, hand tools, furniture, anything that you purchase for your business. If you use it in your business, then you should put it on your expenses as equipment and tools. Okay, going to the next. Receipts, invoices, contracts, lists, or other things of business expenses. And these include, for example, advertising and marketing. That's a category. If you're paying booth fees, if you're buying postcards, if you have a website and you're paying for a domain name and an internet hosting provider, if you're getting someone to graphic design your business cards, if you're buying business cards, if you're buying them from Vistaprint, any signage that you have made, all of those come under the heading of advertising and marketing. Then we've talked about the mileage expenses. That's a whole separate category. Entertainment expenses. It's not like we're doing that much sales, but every now and again you will have to, buy a prospective customer, who's thinking about buying 100 of your widgets. Maybe you're buying them lunch. So you might have an entertainment expense with that. Compensation expenses. If you ever hire staff, whether it's for the day or whether you're paying them for the long haul, if you're hiring them, you need to count that as compensation that you've paid out. You want banking, legal, and other fees. whatever bank fees you have, whatever credit card fees you have. If you call an attorney and he charges you $200 an hour so you can ask him, whether your name is copyrighted. All of those things get captured as expenses. Professional education, if you take classes, if you're buying books, so forth. Collect all of those in a category. Studio-related expenses, if you have studio in your home or if you have it even in another location, you're going to have, you may have phone and utilities, you may have mortgage, you may have homeowner's insurance, you may have insurance someplace else, you may have space rental. All of those things count as studio-related expenses. Okay, once you've got all these expenses, let's say you put them all in a list, and now you've categorize them so that you know what category each expense is. Now you need to organize all of them. If you put them in a spreadsheet, it's pretty easy. Then you tell the spreadsheet to sort according to a category, and a miracle occurs. And you have all of these little groups. You can do it manually, but this is the part where you'll probably want to blow your brains out. When all of the expenses are entered into the database, you can sort it so that you know how much. Well, this is how much I have in expenses for mileage. This is how much I have for cost of goods that go into my thing. This is how much I'm using in paper towels and so forth. The next one is next slide. You can't really read it. You can come up and stare at it, but it has all the various expenses. This shows the vendor, this shows the date of purchase, this is the tax category. This is the product or service, why I bought that thing. If there's mileage involved, I have mileage down here. This is the amount of the expense, which is either the invoice amount or in the case of mileage, it becomes multiplied out. Oops. And then this I have as business and personal, because I put a lot of personal stuff in there because I have to do that for my regular taxes anyway. So you need, this is really critical in doing your taxes. Okay, other important records to keep. You want to keep your inventory of raw materials. For all of you who have beads, for all of you who have clay and glazes, in our case, glass. Anything that goes into the finished thing at the end of each year, you're going to need an inventory of how much you have in your studio at that moment in time. It also includes any framing, mounting, display hardware that you ultimately give to your customers when you sell your art. So, okay, this is an inventory of glass. Just on the left, it's the different sizes of glass that I can buy and the dollar amount. I think usually it's, for a certain size sheet of glass, it costs X amount. You get that from your invoices. I go through and just count all the full sheets of glass, all the half sheets of glass, all the small sheets of glass, all the bottles of Frit and so forth, and then multiply it out. You're going to need that for your taxes. Other important records, you need an inventory of your finished art. What do you have? And this is in part, in case your house burns down so that you can make a claim for it. But you're going to need some specific details. You need the cost to make it, including the costs of raw materials, including displaying, mounting, and framing, any consumable things that you made, any extra labor, equipment rental, or production services that you have to use. This is part of this inventory. So it's, okay, how much does this cost me to make? And then you want the price that you're asking for it. And you may have two different prices. If you're selling in a gallery and you have to give them 50%, it may be different from what you're willing to sell it at as a show. That's a whole marketing discussion as to what you should and shouldn't do. But if you're asking for different prices for different venues, then it's important to make note of that. And then I like to put in my inventory of the finished art a description of each piece, the size, the weight, the title of it, the quantity I made. There's a photo, if I have a product number for the inventory and so forth. You want to include all that information so later you can go back and say, okay, I'm doing a show this Saturday, what do I have in inventory? And you can look at it and say, okay, well, I have 57 items, you know, and they're, you know, 40 of them are little ones, you know, the other 17 are big ones. So you can get a much better picture of what you have available to sell. Be sure to include the cost of your time in your inventory of finished art, because the IRS doesn't count that cost when you do your taxes, but your insurance company might. Okay, the next one is a picture of, this is my ready to sell art. And it's the piece, it's how many of them I have. And some of you all do, you know, multiples of one thing. So that's really good for a quantity, to count the quantity on those. I do the width and the length, because if I'm putting it up online, everybody wants to know how big it is. I do the weight, because that's how I get to the cost of the glass. And then I have the whole cost to make, where it's a calculated thing of all of those, of all the things that have gone into it. And then there's a gallery price and a show price.
How do you calculate the cost of the glass when it's finished? Do you have a formula? Do you create your own formula?
Yes, I created a formula. It's based on what Bullseye, the glass company that I use for, charges for glass. They have different categories of glass. They have some really, the blues and greens tend to be pretty inexpensive. The reds and purples and pinks are much more expensive. So I don't actually use that many of those, so I kind of pick a number in the middle and say, okay, I'm just going to assume that the average cost of a pound of glass that goes into my piece is going to cost this. If I'm using dichroic glass, which is wildly expensive, then I'll add a surcharge and say, okay, the cost of the glass is much higher because I use a lot of some really expensive thing. And that's a number that I can change, you know, for each product, depending on what kind of glass I'm using for that particular work. But that's why I collect the weight on things. I don't know if that would work for ceramics or jewelry or anything like that. Each of you is going to have to kind of come up with some way of assessing that, you know, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Nobody's going to go back, you know, and check how many ounces of silver-plated something or other you used in a pair of earrings. But you need to have a good ballpark, because how else are you going to know whether you're making money or not? Okay. And then on the other important records to create, and I know this is a long list. This should be up on the website, on our website, so you can touch back on this. It should be up there now or within a few days. You want a major equipment inventory. If you have workbenches, grinders, saws, lathes, kilns, looms, the year you bought it, and how much you paid for it. You're going to need this because, to the extent that you have a business license, that's going to trigger a business personal property tax. They're going to want to know about all of the equipment that you have, and then you're going to pay a tax each year. I think this year I owe $359 for all of my kilns and grinders and all of that kind of stuff. Originally I asked, well, you know, I'm not going to put every glass cutter on this list. And they said, no, just, you know, maybe things that cost more than $100 in terms of your equipment and tools. You're going to need your formulas for calculating prices, which we just kind of talked about. It's the cost of your piece is going to equal the cost of raw materials, the cost of consumables, the cost of additional elements that you might add to it, framing, packaging, and so forth. And you can count packaging as part of the cost of goods sold because you sell it with your piece. And then you want a list of all of your donations to nonprofit organizations. Okay, this is just an example of the equipment inventory that I have. It has the purchase date when I bought it and the date that I disposed of it. So you can dispose of it, so you quit paying taxes on it. It's important to have the date that you purchased it, because each year how much the tax that you pay for it gets reduced because of depreciation. So just be sure that you have that list and try and follow the instructions as best you can on the form. It's not for the faint of heart. Additional considerations when forming a business. Give your business a unique, easy to remember name. Research and decide on your business type. Corporation, LLC, sole proprietor. The two that most of us are likely to do are LLCs and sole proprietors. And the difference with that is an LLC, somebody can only sue your business, whereas if you're a sole proprietor, they can, if something happens, they can take you and all of your personal property as well. If you're making that kind of craft, though, you have other issues. Create separate banking accounts and credit cards for your business. It's not critical, but it can be very helpful. Research the different ways to report your business information for tax burden. And that's some of it goes whether it's cash or accrual accounting methods. There's differences. Think about whether you want to claim a deduction for using part of your home as a studio. My studio is now, I've gotten to the point where it takes up something like 21% of my house by square feet. So for me, it kind of makes sense to say, okay, I'm only using this for glass making. Also consider whether you claim your vehicle as a business or personal expense, because it will determine how much you pay in personal property tax on your cars, and whether you get certain deductions for it on the tax side. Any questions? Okay. Now I will turn this over to Carol.
Emily,
Yes, ma'am.
it's not a question, it's a comment. If anybody isn't doing it as a business, one of the advantages of considering your hobby your business, especially if you're just starting out, is that 2 out of every 5 years you can have a loss, and it is deductible. So particularly in that first year when you're buying everything and you don't have a lot of sales, and maybe even the second year, or you just have a bad year where you spent a lot and you didn't sell as much, you didn't do as many shows, whatever, as long as 3 out of every 5 years are a profit, the government will consider it a business. The other thing I do, because I do a cash method in and out, in December, I do a lot of shopping. I look at what my profit is, I look at what I need. Oh, I need a new thing for my grinder, great, this is the perfect time to buy it because it will reduce the tax burden that year as opposed to next year. Maybe next year's not gonna be as good, so you can use it to your advantage.
And pursuant to that, what Carolyn says is absolutely correct. If you have a year where, you really ought to show a profit, you can start you don't have to list every expense. Like some years I say, okay, this year I think I'm going to ignore about half of my mileage, and I don't declare it as an expense, which makes it a little bit easier to show a profit. You can kind of cut back and say, all right, well, yeah, I took some of those classes, but maybe I'm not going to put those in my expenses. So you can kind of decide. No one's ever going to go back and check to see if you bought things that you didn't try to deduct from your taxes. So you can help yourself create a profit when maybe there wasn't one. But for tax purposes, it will keep the auditors off your back.
From year to year, personally, has there been a lot of fluctuation in the price of glass?
It's just generally gone up.
Everything has gone
Well,
up.
one year it took giant leaps up because the glass company in Portland came under attack from the environmental people, and they had to install all new kilns and ventilation systems and so forth. So that year some glasses simply weren't available, so anybody who had some of that glass just really jumped up the charges. It's relaxed a little bit more now, but it's a steady upward thing. And you need to look at that when you're figuring out the cost of your goods sold. I have to change that number every couple of years, kind of in accordance. If I look at the Bullseye catalog, and if they've gone up 10%, then I move my cost thing up 10%.
But basically it's just been up. It hasn't gone up and down and up and down. Okay.
No, it's not like commodities. Glass making, they have to use a lot of elements like gold and cadmium and selenium and some of those. So it's really kind of on the cost of what those elements go for, and they just continue to all go up.
Well, gold has gone from $1,000 to $2,000. Started out, it was $300 or $200 for
Right.
gold. And
Yeah.
now it's $1,200. But it's been as high as $2,000.
Yeah. We've noticed that the glass companies don't really adjust for when things go down. Anyway, all right, let me turn this over to Carol.
Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about credit cards. Why do you take credit cards? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Convenience for you and your customer. Many customers want to pay by credit card, they just don't carry cash with them. Generally, it's more secure than a check. And the other thing I found is people tend to spend more if they can put it on a credit card. Somehow, it doesn't seem like they've spent so much because nothing's left their wallet, right? So those are good reasons to take credit cards. Is there one best system? No, there isn't. And I'm sure in this room we probably have 5 or 6 different systems that people use. I happen to choose Square because when I went out and looked at the different systems, it fit my kind of business and the way I wanted to do things. One of the big things that I had was I wanted to be sure I didn't have to pay a charge per month. And I think that most systems now have gone to where you pay a percentage of sales and that's it. There isn't a monthly charge anymore. But when I was first getting into this, many of the systems you had to pay a monthly charge, which was a kind of a hedge against what you were going to take in as revenue. But I was only selling in October, November, and December, so here I was paying all those charges for all the other months. It does require a bank account for the money to go into, and so you do have to, as Emily had said, it's best to have a separate bank account for it. They all seem to have similar functions also, and I've been really pleased with Square and the way they continue to add things to theirs. The last couple of years, Square has added an inventory system, and that was something I had been writing to them about for years because it just makes it a lot easier for me. I can put in an item, I can say I have 6 of this item, and then as I sell them, it decrements my inventory. And at the end of the year, I know how many I've sold, and I know how many I have left. And they keep adding things to it. So far, I haven't added anything else to what I do because, unfortunately, now a lot of things that they have, you have to pay for. So I do the free things. Benefits of Square, it's quick setup, no long-term commitment. You can use it or not use it whenever you are having a show. They accept virtually every type of credit card payment, and that includes American Express. If you'll remember, for a while, American Express cost more, and so there were some companies that didn't accept it. Square accepts all of them, and I think most of them do now also. You can also accept remote credit card payments, meaning if somebody calls you on the phone and wants to purchase something, you can just take the number of the credit card and put it into Square. I found that it's fast, it makes it simple for pricing, and you can either tap, dip, or swipe, as they say, for the major credit cards, and it was a good way for me to increase my business, actually. There's no signal problem. If many of you have been to shows where you sometimes have a problem getting an internet signal, well, with Square, you just go ahead and swipe the card, and then once you have a signal, it downloads all that stuff. You don't have to do anything else. It just kind of holds it, and once you have a signal, it all goes. And I found that that was really a good thing for me. It provides, as I said, an inventory management at no extra charge. You can keep your business secure. And by that I mean that there is a chargeback protection within Square. There's a fraud detection, and if you take a fraudulent card for some reason, Square backs you with that, and generally it doesn't cost you anything, and you'll get your money. So that's an important thing to know about.
If it's a chip card.
If it's a chip card, yeah, particularly. Before they had the chip, they did it for swipe. But now that they've gone to the chip, they won't do it if you swipe. So if you have a card and you use the chip, then you're covered totally. But if you're still swiping, it's not. And you can swipe chip cards, but the little extra thing that you need does cost money to get it, but it's well worth it, I think. And they do have support when you need it. Now, it's not the kind of thing where they don't give you a telephone number or the telephone number that you call in, you have to call in, and then they call you back with a code, and then you can talk to someone. So, but I found that I've gotten all my questions answered whenever I needed it, so that was fun. So let's look at my Square app. As you can see, pictures down the side. I was able to put in a picture of whatever my art piece is, a description of it, and the price. This was particularly helpful. Usually my daughter helps me at my shows. One year she couldn't help at a couple of shows, and my husband had to be there to help me. Well, to say Adventuring Blue, clear, 8-inch, meant absolutely nothing to him. But if there was a picture there, he could figure out what it was and do it with Square. So even he learned how to do it very quickly, so it's really pretty easy to do.
You guys are so visual.
I know. So, and there's just some more of these are my current sales. Then the next one, I'll show you, it's a completed sale. So if somebody buys something, then it comes up and it asks me, how do they pay? Did they pay by cash? Did they pay by card or gift card? If you have swiped the card or put the card into the little reader, it automatically comes up with what they did. If they paid cash, you can actually put in how much they gave you, and it will tell you what the change is. So if they gave you, the item cost $103.88 and they gave you $120, it'll tell you what change you have to give back to them. So for people who don't like to do the math or can't count change, that's helpful. And there are some people that don't do that real well. The next thing that Square does, it can give you different kinds of reports. And it can, this is where you can see what was the best time for your sales, were there peak times, were there days that were better than others, and of course the days that you have shows are better than the days that you don't. And so that's sort of what that will show you. But you have a lot of reports that you can get out of Square to help you do everything that you're doing. The next screen will show you the sales and if there were any refunds and what the net would be and what were the totals that were collected. Next one is a transaction report, and in this one I could look and see what I sold and how many I've sold and what the total prices were.
Carol?
Yes.
Carol, sorry, I backtrack, I think. So when you sell the item, do you take a picture of it at that time?
No, I put the pictures in ahead of time when I put in my inventory. So I take a picture, I put it in when I add that item to my inventory. And if I add extra things to the inventory, I just change the inventory number. So, yes.
Can you do a picture right there?
You can, yes.
I think you can. Yeah. Marianne, I think, does that with hers. Right, Marianne?
Yes, well, when my son works for me, he takes a picture as we launch the item, and then that actually shows up on the receipt that they get.
Which is nice.
That's it, Square?
That's Square.
Okay. Next slide. Inventory items. So this shows what I have and what I have left in stock and what the price is. So remember we were talking about the inventory. This was something had been looking for I probably had Square for 3 years before this inventory thing came in, and when it did, it was a big help to me because I sell some small things like Christmas ornaments, and so I might have 15 green trees or something like that, and I could put that in and I didn't have to keep counting. I knew what I had at the end. The other thing that it allows you to do is when you're going to do your taxes, I can go in and I can say, I want to know what my sales were for January 1 through March 31. So when I have to do my sales tax, and I print that off and I put it with my tax filing, so I know exactly what it was. That's been a big help, and I have to do it every 3 months, and that's been a big help for doing that sort of thing. And then also with the categories, the next allows for grouping of different types of things. So, and some of you have that, yes.
Have you tried to sell online through Square?
Try to do what online?
So,
Sell online. No, I have not. But I know you can do that, and they have a lot of help for doing that. Yes.
How long does it take to do the inventory?
How many items do you have?
Well,
Well, once you start, all you do is add to it, right?
let's say you're putting in 200 items, how long would that take?
How fast can you type? I mean, that's kind of, Kara asked how long it takes to put like 200 items into the inventory. And it really depends upon how much description you want to put in, how fast you move from one screen to the other. But when you go to put something in, all the information you're going to put on one screen, and then you save it, and then you move to the next item. So I would say, I don't know, if I had 200 plates that I had to put in with descriptions and that type of thing, it probably would take me a couple of hours, maybe 3, to do 200 items. So, but it just depends upon how fast you are in going through. So I know that some of you use other forms, and all of these companies are competing against each other now, so they're all beginning to get the same features. So whatever works for you works. Any questions? Yes?
You forgot one thing, the feedback that you can get from customers?
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Yes, you do. You can get feedback from your customers because if their customer chooses to receive a receipt and not an electronic receipt, then at that point they can give feedback to you, which is nice.
What do you have to do to get their email? Isn't there something weird about that?
No, when a sale is, Emily asked about getting their email. When we make the sale and I ask them if they'd like a receipt, they can get a text or they can get an email. And then they put in either their text number or their email. Unfortunately, that is not anything that I have access to. They put it in and I can't get access to that. Yes, Elaine?
And once they put it in at any other Square user, it's already in there.
Right.
So
If you want that for marketing purposes, you won't be able to have access to it.
That's right.
For marketing purpose, you can advertise through Square, and Square will tap into your email list and then advertise your product.
But they won't give the emails to you.
Correct, but if you pay an extra fee to advertise your product, they have that information for you.
Pay an extra fee.
Pay an extra fee, and yes, yeah.
So does that mean that they can find your customers and tell them you're gonna be at such a show?
Yeah.
If they how many people you want to reach, 300 people, they charge you $10 maybe less.
Are they the select your customers people?
Yes.
It's just, oh, cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
people that have bought from you.
But
People that have bought from you, correct.
Yeah, but it's an extra fee, remember that.
That's okay.
It's not free.
Yes,
So before you referring to chip versus swipe,
yes,
and that if you have the chip reader,
yes.
the company will back you. But when you do the swipe, it tells you whether or not the card is approved or declined.
Both of them tell you that.
Right. So what you're saying is it's possible that somebody has a counterfeit card and it
Right.
says approved, and then you're
Right.
up to creek, right?
Unless you use the chip, the
Chip.
Yeah.
chip will affect it.
Yeah.
Even if it doesn't have a chip?
Well, if it
No,
doesn't
your
have a
credit
chip,
card
that's
has to have a chip.
Most cards that are going out now have a
Has
chip
chip,
on them.
right. Just about every card has a chip.
Did you say you have to pay extra to accept the chip?
No,
No, but you have to buy a chip reader,
Oh, I see.
which costs them. They give you the swiping thing for free.
Right.
The chip reader is what, $40 or something?
I think so, around $30.
No, it's about 49.
Yeah.
I think the price is coming down.
Oh, okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.